we've been having mostly, I guess, ag related conversations up to this point. We'll be hearing more from the ag agency tomorrow. And before we start, let's just do a quick once around the room because we're new to you.
Yep.
And some of us are committee with experience, some not. So I'm David Durfee. I'm the chair of the committee. I'm from Bennington County, town of Shaftesbury, represent Glastonbury and Sunderland.
Rodney Graham, represent Orange 3, which is down Chelsea.
Henry Pearl, Caledonia, Washington District, which is Danville, Beach, and Cabot.
Charles Wilson, Caledonia 3, which is Linden, Sheffield, Wheelock, Sutton, and Newark.
Okay.
David Templeman, that's Orleans 3, so Westmore, Brownington, and Barton.
Great.
I just need to say you always do it on your finger.
I know.
So funny. Josie Levitt, Grandel Chittenden, which is all of Grandel County, and West Milton.
Mike Rice, the Bennington Rutland District. It's Dorset, Danby, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
John O'Brien, Windsor Orange 1, Royalton, and my hometown of Tunbridge.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, and Hartford.
Heather Supnat, Vice Chair, Windsor 4, and Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
Fantastic.
And you met our committee assistant, Laura, here behind the desk, and Representative Lipsky, we can ask him to introduce himself when he comes in. He's from Stowe. So.
He's a neighbor.
I wondered, yeah. Okay.
He's actually our forester in the committee.
That's right. He is the one among us who has hands-on experience. Well, maybe not. We've got Representative Pearl also, I guess, but good. And I should have said we have a state park in Shaftesbury, and I'm not sure whether other members do. Yeah, Emerald Lake in Dorset.
We have a great state park. I mean, Grandel County has tons of state parks. They're gorgeous.
We have a new one at Lake Willoughby.
Yes, we're doing some infrastructure improvements there now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Emerald Lake in East Dorset was recently the state park of the year.
Well, you win.
You win.
I didn't know there was a competition.
Neither did I until we were victors.
Well, welcome, Commissioner, and looks like you've got a presentation for us, so we'll feel free to get started.
Great. For the record, my name's Danielle Fitzko. You can call me Danny. I am the interim commissioner for the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. For some background, I've been with the department for 20 years. I spent 15 years as the program manager for urban community forestry. So my roots are in the downtown, trying to green the downtown areas. But I've been a director of forests for the past 4 years. And so I'm serving in this interim role. As you can imagine, for FPR, this is quite a transition for us. Commissioner Snyder was with us for 12 years. So I think maybe I have a half a pinky toe under me right now as I'm trying to balance it all, but grateful to be here and to work with you as partners going forward. So this, I think you can go to the next slide. And I approach this as really just an introduction to FPR, and then happy to answer any questions along the way, figuring some people are new and I'm new, that would just be sort of like what we do in FPR. Yeah. So our name actually is quite descriptive. We're Forest, Parks, and Recreation. And so for forest, really, our service is about keeping Vermont's forest healthy, intact, and sustainably managed. For parks, we actually this year just had 1.1 million visitors to our parks, and that's just during the operating season. If we were to actually count the amount of people that visited the parks during the non-operating season, I think that number would be pretty staggering. And then outdoor recreation, really supporting the growth, which you've seen tremendous growth in outdoor recreation and the diversification of that across the state. I think you can go to the next slide. This is our core organizational structure for the management team. As I'm serving an interim, and then I just call out our Executive Services Coordinator is Caroline Zeilinger. So any sort of requests that the committee has, she keeps us on track and on point. So she's the one to go to. And then from there, it's pretty straightforward. We have 3 program areas. Forest, and you'll see I am still serving as director right now, but I'm super fortunate to have great teams all around me that I'm leaning on pretty hard right now. State Parks is Nate McKean. Lands Administration and Recreation is Becca Washburn. And then our business office should probably be the highlight of the org chart because they are the heartbeat that keeps all the services going. And Agnes Barcelo is a new position for us. She's our operations manager. There's so much systems improvements that we need across the whole department. She's leading all those efforts. And then Ainsley Bloomer is our financial manager. And then that team, really, I look at it as we are supporting 130 staff across the department, mainly located in 5 district offices across the state. And then we really balloon up in the summertime, bringing on our temporary staff to operate the state parks. It's a huge feat to onboard so many people very quickly. But I will say it's what a fantastic, diverse population of individuals that we really bring in a lot of times from outside of Vermont. And from what I understand, many times they fall in love and they stay in Vermont. So it's a great attractant to come experience Vermont's great outdoors and then hopefully stay. So that's our team. I guess we can go to the next slide. What I'm gonna do now is sort of just give you the overview of what goes on in each of our divisions. And I know this team focuses a lot on forestry, so we have a breadth of services in forestry. We like to say Vermont is forest strong. We are just about 75% forested in the state, a really robust resource. And you can imagine all that forests provide to Vermont and Vermonters. I could probably take the whole session to tell you all the benefits of why forests matter. This is the largest division in the department. We have about 60 full-time staff here. And I think our services are probably not that recognized. And I think it's because we are hanging out in the woods under the canopy and not necessarily as out there as the agricultural community, but they do a lot. And so I'm just going to kind of give you our program areas. First up is forest protection. I say this one first because part of this team is forest health. And at the core of what we do in forestry, forest health is first. That's what we say, healthy forest first. This team is on the ground and even in planes monitoring the health of our forests. That helps us understand what's going on and then prepare for any threats that may be coming at us. Like I'm sure you've heard of emerald ash borer. We had spongy moth. They're looking at impacts from climate. And so that's the team that works across all programs to help us understand what's going on. Also embedded in this team is our wildland fire small team of a few people. And we don't have a lot of wildland fires in Vermont, but we do have them, and they're mostly human caused. Think about campfires or burning the brush pile in the backyard. That's mainly where our wildland fires originate. But we are starting to see an increase of wildland fires in the region. So it's really important that we are prepared and can respond. We work with Vermont fire wardens across the state and a lot of the fire departments, getting them trained up so they can respond as well. But it's much different than a structural fire when you're looking at a ground fire in the woods and you need long hoses to get out there. So it's a much different approach. The next team I'll call out is our private lands team. Vermont's forests are 80% owned by private landowners. So they're really on the front lines of working with private landowners. The bulk of the work is the UVA, Use Value Appraisal or Current Use Program administering the forest land category. In Vermont, we have 4.5 million acres of forests. 2 million are enrolled in the forest land category of UVA. So that's quite, it's almost 50% and 16,000 parcels. So they're managing quite a lot of really UVA management plans. And so it's a lot of work, but it's really, really important work. Our state lands team, the Agency of Natural Resources owns 360 or manages 360,000 acres of land, and our team in forestry lead the planning of all agency lands. And then we actually are the managers of about 190,000 acres of land. And if you think of all the different uses of public land and users of public land, it's a pretty demanding to figure out how you balance all that work. And so this team, pretty small for the amount of work that really small for the amount of work they do. Think about all the recreational assets, the road infrastructure. It's quite a bit. Then urban and community forestry, this is where my roots are. This is the team that greens the gray development. They really work with municipalities to really think about how you maximize the power of trees in our downtowns, village centers. And then we have forest economy. This may be an area I'm sure you'll be really engaged in. This program supports the forest product sector. So think foresters, loggers, truckers, sawmill owners, secondary manufacturers like furniture makers. That's what this team supports. And in Vermont, our forest product sector brings in about $2 billion a year in economic activity and has about 13,000 employed in the forest economy, forest product sector, not the big forest economy, just really the forest product. And again, I think.
What was that number again?
It's 2 billion. Yeah.
How many persons?
13,000. And we have a great one pager on the economic contributions to the forest product sector.
Does that include maple syrup production?
It does have syrup in there.
Mhm.
Sap, syrup, yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that I think, again, because we're under the canopy of the woods, this is actually greater than the agricultural side, the amount of economic activity that it does have for the state. I will share at the end this great planning resource that we're embarking on now that this committee last year helped initiate. It's really meant to be like the farm to plate, but for the forest product sector. And then the last program in forestry is watershed forestry. And this is really working with foresters and loggers during forestry operations, making sure we're putting best management practices in place to protect water quality. So that's our forest team, and all of it's about healthy forests and keeping Vermont's forest strong. And I can go to the next slide. The next is our state parks. Sounds like we have a lot of people who've been to, hopefully all of you have been to one of our 55 developed world-class state parks. They're all across the state in some fabulous locations. It's no small feat to bring almost 1.2 million visitors in a very short time through our state parks. And it's even harder when you're working really a business enterprise in state government. It's not as nimble as it is if you're not inside the procurement and everything around the system of state government. So that brings its own challenges. So the way we like to talk about it is our parks are the gateway to the natural world. I think we consider us one of the largest environmental education organizations in the state because we have a lot of educational programs throughout our state parks. We are the third largest structure owner in state government with 250 million in infrastructure assets, thinking about all the toilet buildings and all the buildings that were needed to support the state parks, and 2,200 campsites. In order to keep people coming to the state parks, we need to keep them modern, right? We need to keep reinvesting. And so it does have a workforce for the trades industry the parks support because we reinvest and we bring contractors in to support that. Parks are conserved land and have a lot of conservation value that we're providing to the state. I like to think of all the shorelands that have been preserved and are now accessible to the public. And then finally, they bring $1 million in economic benefits to our local communities. So these are really green gems all across the state for conservation, economic value, and our over our culture. And then the last, I can switch again. And then the last bucket really is our lands administration and recreation, and they provide a few areas of service. One is lands administration, and while it's nested in FPR, this team provides the lands administration for the whole Agency of Natural Resources, so Fish and Wildlife and Department of Environmental Conservation. So think of like land records and all that real estate transactions and like licenses and leases. The lands administration team in FPR handles all that. They also support the planning that goes on state lands. If we have this model organization of, I think nationally, of how we actually plan for and manage state lands in Vermont. We manage it by districts. So we have 5 districts throughout the state, and then we have interdisciplinary district stewardship teams. And so it includes an ecologist, watershed specialist, recreation specialist, forester, wildlife biologist, and a fisheries biologist. They all come together and they develop the long-range management plan. So they're looking, all those lenses are included, plus a robust public comment period. And then for every management activity, it goes through the district stewardship team. So it really is a good, comprehensive, science-based, thoughtful approach of how we plan for and manage public lands. This team also leads our land conservation efforts, whether it's going to be Fee Simple, that's joining our A&R's lands that we manage. We also have a program called Forest Legacy, which works with private landowners for purchase easements, and we hold 140,000 acres in easement lands on private land. And then the last big bucket is our outdoor recreation. Clearly, we know that it's a huge economic driver in the state, and we have a lot of recreation on state lands, but the backbone is really on private landowners. And so this team works with partners who really support private landowners and managing those trails networks. They also lead the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, probably know it as VOREC. And this was Governor Scott initiative to support the recreation economy in the state. And then they also are grant makers. So they give grants out to mostly partners, nonprofit partners, to plan for and manage that robust trail network we have across the state. So that is our Lands Administration and Recreation division. I do want to just share brief. Am I going too fast? You all okay?
No, it's
okay.
Great. No, it's good.
Okay. I do want to share a little bit about our business office, just because we're really different than most of the other departments and agencies across the state, primarily because we run a business. We run the state parks, and we only have 6 individuals in our business office, and we don't have huge amount of money that we're moving, but we have a ridiculous amount of volume. And I just want to kind of give you a flavor for that, because if anyone's listening out there, if we're slow sometimes, we got a lot going on. We average and process about 9,000 invoices a year. So if you're thinking about like state parks and all we purchase commodity wise, think about our concession stands. There's just a lot of stuff we have to buy. We take in through like reservations about $8 million of deposits a year, but it's also like not only reservations, but all the other services like boat rentals and again, concessions. And then don't forget, people cancel. So we have to give back $1 million every year. So these are just all like a heck of a lot of transactions. We also contract out about $11 million a year. We do a lot for, we contract out firewood, we contract out ice, a lot of that is management of the parks, but also generally state lands, like plowing services, during the winter when we're trying to keep public access open. We contract out all those services. And then we are grant makers and probably move about 200 grants a year. So that's our small business team. This is our budget. Our budget's about 32 million a year. This was FY23. I did take out the one-time funds because they inflate it and doesn't really kind of show you like what we typically get. You'll see that most of it is in salaries and benefits. That's the service team that's providing all the work. And then contracts and operations, that's really mainly going to be for managing state lands and the contracts that we have out. It's really the operations that keep things going. And then we grant out about $4 million. I took out the one-time funds, so that would be more because we got $5 million in VORC funds last year. But so we do have a steady grants program going out.
Can I just ask, can you say a little bit more about the grants, what they might look like?
Sure. We have a lot of recreation grants. Right now we have VORC grants. It's that Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. And we got 5 million FY22 and 5 million FY23. And they are meant to really support those partner organizations for planning and management. We also have recreation trails program grants, so another recreation grants, land and water conservation fund, another recreation focused grants program, but that also does land conservation. And then on the forestry side, really the only grants we give out is in the urban and community forestry program, where we support grants to mostly municipalities to help them green and manage their downtown urban forests.
Yeah, John.
Oh, I was just wondering about ski areas that when they lease state land, does that go into your budget or does it go straight into like the state's general fund?
So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what the revenue is. Yeah. And so our revenue is not mostly, only 30% general funds. And that varies between the division. Actually, State Parks only gets about $600,000 in general funds. But Forestry Division, because we don't have any fees or we're heavier on general funds. They get about 20,000 in federal funds. A lot of that's from the Forest Service and then also National Park Service. And in forestry in particular, we go after competitive grants all the time just to enhance our service. Invasives are coming at us. We're looking to bring somebody on to focus on emerald ash borer. So we have to go after those competitive resources. And then 42% in Park Special Fund. That is where you will see the ski lease. It does come to us. And so we have a partnership with 7 ski resorts where a portion of their skier visits does come back to FPR and supports the Vermont State Parks. I think it's important to just call out here that for Vermont State Parks, about 75% of their budget is revenue that they bring in. So gate receipts, concessions, boat rentals. And what they're seeing right now with inflation is that they're seeing costs at about 40% higher, like all that they're buying. And so that's really hard to sort of close that gap. So it's something that they're really thinking about, like could be a real budget pressure for us coming forward. We did last year do a fee bill and increase the prices. They did an economic analysis and recognized that Vermont's prices were much lower. So they did raise them, but we also were having difficulty recruitment for those 400 seasonals. So I think it's fantastic. We were able to give them more money, but that pretty much just ate up that $1.5 million in fees that we just increased was, in paying people really what they deserve. Yeah.
I'm wondering if hunting permits somehow come into this indirectly, perhaps?
No, we all go to really Fish and Wildlife. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And none of their budget goes to you.
The only time we do have an MOU with Fish and Wildlife because our foresters do the forest management on wildlife management areas. Mm-hmm. So we do support, we do all the silviculture and forest management on WMAs. But it does support our team, but it's work on fish and wildlife property. Yeah. And so we actually contribute to that by giving 25% to them to match their grant.
Oh,
So,
Representative Lipsky.
Yes.
Commissioner, is this only this chart for state parks or state forests and parks?
it's our whole department. So it's forests, it's parks, it's recreation, and it's our overall, support services that, like our business office is all embedded here, admin services.
Where would revenue from timber sales or stumpage?
Yeah, that does not come into our budget. There's a special fund called Lands and Facilities Trust Fund that those receipts, at least from state forests, go to. And so we only tap into a percentage of that, which we put back into stewardship on the ground. So it does not funnel into our budget. We do not pay staff with those funds. It really is meant to be stewardship, and we only really spend a small portion of that. Now, state parks, timber sale revenue goes into the park special fund, and fish and wildlife, WMAs, goes into fish and wildlife.
Representative, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Representative Rice.
I'm just wondering what the range or starting hourly is for those, what you were able to raise it to for the seasonals.
I don't know exactly what that is. These are some of the details that maybe another month from now I'll have. Because it's only been it's been like 9 days.
And then relatedly, well, congrats. Thanks for being here. Has there been conversation in this, if this is also something you're not there on yet, that's fine. But has there been conversation about contracting out concessions or things like that?
Oh, we do.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, a lot of times we do have contract out someone to manage those concessions, for sure. I think each park's maybe a little bit different based on.
Is that a case by case based on the park's situation, or is there a sort of rule for when that happens?
No, I don't really know for sure, but we can bring Nate McKean in to give you the Parks 101. I think it'd be fascinating to hear the operations of state parks and some of the great things that they're doing, but also some of the challenges it is to manage. My gut is they look at each situation and figure out what's the best approach there. I know on Burton Island, someone manages a little store there. In some cases, we manage the concession stand. Okay, I guess we'll go to the next slide. I have 2 more slides. One's going to give you sort of current efforts, and then I kind of want to wrap up of why we matter so much in Vermont. So I think I mentioned earlier the Vermont Forest Future Strategic Roadmap. This is something that was put into law last year. We actually got quite a bit amount of resources, $250,000, to hire a contractor to develop this 10-year action plan for the forest product sector and the broader forest economy. We got the money, starting July 1, and we went out to bid for the contractor, and we do have a contractor on board now called Future IQ. In addition, we partnered with Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, just recognizing their interest and value in this space and their expertise on the ag side with the farm to plate. We've entered into a grant agreement with them, so they're on our core planning team as well, which is fantastic. And now we're in this public engagement phase to build out this roadmap. And this contractor is really making us think 10 years out. Who are the decision makers? Because they're not the ones that are here today. What are those key drivers that we really need to be thinking about? And then what is that future state we want to be at? And then we'll build out our strategies to help us get there. So far to date, we've had industry roundtables, 5 of them around the state, really thinking about those directly involved in the forest product sector. We have a public survey out now. We've so far have 350 people. I'll send it to you. You should take the survey. And then we're into this phase now called the think tank, where you identify those key drivers that will sort of change the future. And then we have a big think tank meeting with about 80 people on the end of this month to really think about what is our plausible future and what are those pillars that we need to be setting up so we go to our desired future. And then we'll sort of come up with those strategies, and then we're going to take it again, we're going to take it out to really hear broadly and refine them. But this was asked, this was asked by the legislature. This is your request that we do this. And so in June, I think it's, I'll just say July 1, we will come back with our draft recommendations. And then in January 2024, we will provide you with this roadmap. And one of the key things that you asked for was actionable strategies that you could take. And I think we're getting such great engagement and excitement about it is because it was asked for by the legislature. And we've done planning efforts after planning efforts, and that everyone's like, well, what's going to make this different? It's because you've asked for it is what everyone's so excited about that's making it different. And we're giving it our all. We've got a fantastic contractor and good team. Be happy to share more about this with you, even bring our contractor in. If you want to be engaged in any other way, we welcome that. I will share with you the great portal that we have that explains it, but we're really excited to really be thinking about what are those. I think we sometimes get in the weeds of what we need right now, but we're not thinking about what does it look like down the road. So that's what this is going to do for us.
You can't see the forest for the trees.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, so this is really something that you worked on a lot this committee worked on last year.
Those of us who were.
Yeah, that were here.
Last year, which is a minority. But we are hearing, we're going to have Ellen from the Sustainable Jobs Fund visit tomorrow to give us an overview of the work they do. And just wanted to mention that, but I think it would be great if you or others could come in and give us an update, understanding that it's a work in progress and that it's 6 months out before there's even a draft report. But if you've got information that you'd like to share, I think that would be wonderful.
I would love to, because we're responding to the request, and we're just thrilled about this process right now. This industry should feel really good right now. It's a green, renewable resource. We need we need forest products for the future, yet they're not feeling good at all. They've worker issues, prices are really high. We're converting land. We have polarization states saying forest management's not good. So at a time when they should be really optimistic, I'll tell you that they're not, and that I hope this brings us all together to really think about what it looks like, and also helps get the message out that our forest product sector is really important to Vermont. It's a green, renewable resource. We do it right here in Vermont. I mean, we have gold standard of forest management. We don't get it here. We're getting it somewhere else, trucking it in. It may not be at the standards that we do have here. So I hope that we can get that out.
Before you move to the next slide, a couple questions, Representative O'Brien.
One, is that Lucy Rogers?
It is, Lucy.
Former rep, right?
She works at a sawmill.
Oh, that's what I thought. It's gotta be her, yeah.
Sustainable Jobs Fund has done this fabulous article series and photos. So we've been able to use them. It's just fantastic. I mean, it's telling that story. Again, we're in the woods and we're not always telling it as much. I think the agriculture community is at the farmer's market much more up front and seen. But for the forest product sector, it's really part of our Vermont culture, rural economy, something that we're working hard on.
John, you get the prize for identifying.
I know, it's like, it's not photos, right? It's just former representatives. My real question was, will you give us an update on the enrolling the state forest in carbon offset markets?
Sure, yeah, so I think it was I'm gonna try and go back. There was a study group at some time ago for thinking about enrolling state lands in carbon markets. And one of the outcomes was we should give a report. We should think about what it looks like to do that. So we had a team pulled together from, I think we had some Fish and Wildlife staff on there as well. And they took a deep dive into what this could look like. And we provided a recommendation, I guess, to the commissioner. So I guess it comes to me now. And where we landed is that we want to make sure we're not greenwashing, that it actually really is, an offset. that if we were to do it, we'd want to do it so our staff could learn the process and then support other Vermonters in understanding it. So we'd be sort of a pilot and a model and build our own understanding of it. And we did identify some parcels that we think would be the prime ones to enroll. We also felt like we could not do that if we didn't have the additional staffing capacity to actually like really be involved as opposed to just putting it out to a contractor, because it was meant to be like more of an understanding and a model for enrolling. But we wanted to make sure it was honest too at our core. And we also wanted to make sure that if you're selling offsets that we kept it local in Vermont.
For like what, for example?
Well, I mean, you could sell offsets out of state. So I don't know, we don't know where it would go, but we felt like it was important if we're offsetting, we should offset our own greenhouse gas emissions. So it hasn't moved besides the report, but that's where we're at right now. So we can share more. I can share more with you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We actually met on the
Yeah.
Zoom.
I'm a Stowite too, but you probably didn't realize that.
You're a card-carrying Stoic. I didn't know that. Anyway, I did not run for this office because I had self-interest in the forest products industry. I ran to represent my community and my broad engagement in the community. But I do have a unique position. I'm very grateful to have been appointed to this committee because of a lifetime of leadership and just pure artist work in the woods for the last 56 years. So, and when I asked a few questions, someone were natural resources, some were as far as parks and recreation, and I appreciated your awareness that you had that all is not well in La La Land. And La La Land includes the forest products industry, and the base underbelly of that industry are those that actually go into the forest and try to harvest the raw material then to enter into the chain of forest products. So thank you for acknowledging that, because that's not just Jed being paranoid or seeing a glass that's 3/4 empty, but it is in every segment of our state, I see that as it's a real crisis. And that former rep is in Fletcher, Vermont, and that's Laughingstock Farm and Forestry. And that is one of these great locally owned and operated. They take in not a high common denominator product. It's called Eastern Hemlock, not always a high demand, but they make high quality timbers and have been a growing company. It's another similar size in Wolcott called PNR Lumber. And they both represent low transport distances, thus lower carbon footprint. And we're very good at supplying when it was 400% increase. PNR didn't go up 10% on their product during the pandemic boom. So keeping local timber produced locally is a win in every aspect of carbon and economy. So thank you for your awareness. Your former boss speaks highly of you, and thank you for coming to our.
Thank you. We used to have 70 sawmills in the state, probably back in the 90s. We may be down to 20.
Well, we had 500 and some in the 50s and 60s when I started in the 60s.
Yeah.
And you're right, we're down to 20 maybe.
Amazing. Representative Levitt had her hand up.
Oh, I just had a question about accessibility for the state parks.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some parks are trying to be a little more accessible. what are your thoughts on that and what's happening with that?
Yeah, it's been a priority for this team to be working on when resources are available. They retrofit campsites, they're making recreation trails accessible. We were fortunate with some of the federal CARES funds that came in that was directly for accessible recreation. So it is a focus, overall accessibility for ADA accessibility, but even thinking about language access now as well. State parks will eventually have like staff will have I speak cards so that if someone needs something translated. So it is a priority to be thinking about that.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think, did you have your hand up earlier? Well, let's go with Representative Wilson, who hasn't had a chance.
I was just wondering, so it could be clarified, that I understand that Vermont's carbon footprint is less than 0.1%. So I was wondering, what is our concern about that?
This is not my area of expertise to tell you about our emissions, but we could bring in Jane Lazorchek, who heads A&R's climate office. We work hard in forestry to think about how do we be, as a mitigation, because forests certainly are a green bank for us, and thinking about, we have a carbon budget now and understanding that. But also we think about like, how do we adapt forests because they are also receiving sort of the impacts from climate change. But I don't know those numbers for you.
We have, I think, an invitation going out to Jane.
Oh, good.
To come in and talk to us about that topic. And there'll be others coming in either next week or the week after. We'll have some time to talk about so climate change mitigation, resilience, and adaptation are in our review. Yeah.
Yeah, I just asked a question because I wanted to know, because I hear things for constituents that doesn't mean it's right or wrong or whatever. There's just always a lot of questions.
I mean, I think transportation is our biggest area for improvement. Then I think it goes to like heating. But the biggest thing for forests is we don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
That's that.
Representative Rice.
Yeah, one's just a follow up to something that Representative Brown was asking about the carbon offsets, and you said, I appreciate that you landed on not wanting it to be greenwashing if you were to engage in it. I'm just wondering if you came to any conclusions about how that might happen or how you would avoid that. And then also just wondering, separate topic, if there's a place where we can see what the end use is for Vermont forest products, where it's going. Is it staying in state? Is it going elsewhere?
Yeah, it would be probably great at some point to bring our forest economy person in to give you an understanding of sort of the wood flow. A lot of it does leave and then has to come back because we don't have processing capability in the state. So it would be probably really valuable just to get an understanding of how much we are actually harvesting. And I will tell you that we're harvesting at least 3 to 1. So we have so much growth and even like mortality that we're only harvesting like less than half of that. So there's a lot of growth going on. So there's still a lot of opportunity, but he can give you like the percentages of what we're harvesting and where it's going.
And then just if there's anything you have to say about sort of, if you discovered any ways that you would go about making sure that carbon offsets weren't.
Yeah, so one of the things that we identified is that first we'd have to have a long range management plan on any parcel that we'd look at and understanding like what we would be considering for forest management. And then the reality is it's like you either you change your harvesting practice or you pretty much delay that. And on state lands, we don't have a very robust forest management program just because staff capacity and everything else. We'd have to make sure we're being honest that we're extending that rotation and changing sort of our practices so we are not removing as much. And
is there, Dave?
I'm just thinking the removal of lumber from the forest, most of that lumber ends up getting locked into walls, and which is actually a carbon store. So not exactly sure if slowing down the would help that effort. It's a very complicated thing.
And I'm not the best. We had a climate forester, but she went to UVM, but she's awesome and you can bring her in. It is true, durable wood products store, and that's one of the best parts about, we harvest and we can continue to store it and then we can grow more. But there is standards that these market developers have, and you have to follow those standards. I'm not the expert here at all, but I can get you an expert that can go into it for you, which would be Ali Kasiba at UVM, who was our climate forester, but she's studied this, she led the group. She's probably saying I'm not doing it nearly. She's probably like, Danny, what are you saying right now?
What's the last name?
Kosiba?
Kosiba.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
Did I hear you say that there was a report that was issued
Yeah.
sometime last year or two?
Yeah, so there was an internal report to making a recommendation of this approach, which I don't think it would be any problem to share what that looks like.
Okay, great.
Yeah. It was just a recommendation of this is how we could approach it.
I want to be conscious of the time and
Yeah, what time?
you've got more slides.
Okay.
If you have time at the end, and I know you talked about your background, and I think I'd be interested in hearing more about that too, but we'll let you go ahead with.
Okay, I'll be quick here. UVA Reserve Forest Land was a new category in UVA forest land that was passed last year. We've developed the minimum management standards, and that we'll be able to enroll parcels in the reserve forest land UVA starting July 1. I won't say more than that because it's pretty complex. And if you want to hear about that, I can bring our lead in, Keith Thompson, on that. But just huge monumental change in UVA to even have a new subcategory, which is not necessarily saw timber focused. It's about obtaining old forest values and conditions, functions going forward. Just quickly, we talked about the pressures on parks. They're going through a modernization study right now, thinking about the organization, how do they bring revenue in, what does their infrastructure look like? We'll have that probably June-ish, so that's something that's going on right now. Parks has also had some influx of some federal funds to bring Wi-Fi to the parks, mostly because of our IT transactions that we need to happen at the contact station, but it's a benefit also to the park visitors. Next year, Parks turns 100, so it's a birthday. We'll be celebrating. Hope you can join us. Just wanted to share, we talked about recreation grants. Also this year, we're due to develop our statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. So that's thinking about the vision for recreation. That's going on. We're dealing with federal funding, and that may be what you're talking about with urban, because Chris Campany caught me in the hallway. And then just talking about we've had so much come in and so much stress in our business office. We have to take a focus internally to make sure that the heart is doing okay. So that's quickly what we're working on. And I don't think I need to talk about you can put up the last slide, but it's basically why we matter. We're workforce development.